It is only during the winter of life that we figure out how well we stored things up during the summer and the fall. Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for another poetry discussion, which will appear in two separate playlists here on the channel. Number one being the poetry discussion playlist, number two being the Reading in a Winter Wonderland playlist, which is a playlist of videos dedicated to winter literature, poetry, and short stories, and a review of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. On the channel, which will take place during the month of December 2024. The poem in question today is Sonnet 2 from William Shakespeare, and it reads as such. When 40 winters shall besiege thy brow, and dig deep trenches in thy beauty's field, thy youth's proud livery so gazed on now, will be a tattered weed, of small worth held. Then, being asked where all thy beauty lies, where all the treasure of thy lusty days, to say within thine own deep sunken eyes were an all-eating shame, and thriftless praise. How much more praise deserved thy beauty's use, if thou couldst answer, this fair child of mine shall sum my account and make my old excuse, proving his beauty by secessions thine. This were to be new made when thou art old, and see thy blood warm when thou feelst it cold. So I thought it might be useful to kind of talk down the poem in basic modern English, sort of a living English translation like you get for the Bible. So here's basically what is said in the poem. When you're 40 years old and wrinkles attack your face and carve deep lines into the once smooth surface of your beauty, your youthful appearance, which is admired so much now, will become worn and shabby, valued by no one. A bit harsh, don't you think, William? When someone asks where your beauty has gone and where the vitality of your youthful days has disappeared, if you say it's just left in your own tired, sunken eyes, it would be shameful and wasteful to have nothing to show for it. How much better it would be if you had used your beauty wisely, by being able to say, this beautiful child of mine carries on my legacy and is proof of my youth, showing that their beauty came from yours. This would make you feel renewed even when you're old, and let you see your life continue even when you feel old and cold. Now, I think that there are 4 talking points to be had here, but before we get into any of that, William Shakespeare uses the number 40. Perhaps 40 was the time when men started losing their looks in William Shakespeare's day. I refuse to believe that it is that way today. But I want to talk about the theme here of winter and of cold. The first thing that I want to raise is the fact that we start this poem, when 40 winters shall besiege thy brow. Now, this could have been 40 summers. This could have been 40 falls. This could have been 40 springs. The year is not, or the time of year is not going to make that much of a difference on the scale of 40 years, right? But we do start with an allusion towards the winter. This is because winter is the end of the year and thus represents the end of life. Now, again, in William Shakespeare's day, perhaps this was true. I refuse to think that 40 would be all that close to one's end, especially for a beautiful man. In today's world, we live longer, I think. But the end of life. Now, interestingly, this poem is addressed to a man. This affects the likelihood of passing on one's genes at the age of 40. Much more difficult for a woman, much more dangerous for a woman. Men pass on their genes at any age. It would be interesting. So if you're writing a paper, if you're here because you're writing a paper on Sonnet 2 and you want to get an A, I've been through the rigmarole of getting an English literature degree. Feminism, a paper on feminism always gets you an A. I never wrote one. But write a paper about how there would have to be two different. So women have always lived longer than men as long as they did not die in something like childbearing. So the life expectancy might be lower for women, but the average life that is survived still would have been longer. However, for a woman in this situation, were this poem addressed to a woman, the idea of winter would not have worked. Would it have been the winter of the reproductive cycle, the winter of the likelihood of reproduction in life? Again, especially in the days of Shakespeare, this would have been you would have been much less likely to give birth, to get pregnant at 40 than at 20, 21, for example. Or would the winter of life, or would the winter in question be the winter of life, not the winter of the reproduction cycle or reproduction's likelihood? So that is an interesting thing to denote. Also, handily for the poem is about passing on your genes, right? The poem cites winter, the winter months, when 40 winters shall besiege thy brow. During the winter, a couple things are true. Number one, you're shut in. You are not out about. You are not making all that many trips to the market or wherever it is that you're going. The laundromat like they had back in Shakespeare's day. You're staying in. You and your lady are forced to be together. Also, in the day of Shakespeare, a lot of the workday was shorter. You weren't tending the fields, for one, but if you worked in commerce, it cost extra money to have that fire going, something that we see in A Christmas Carol, right? It cost extra money to have that fire going both for light and for heat. So the workday was shorter. One interesting tidbit from history, they say that during the winter months, people used to sleep way more. Like 10 hours of sleep a night was not that unusual. One of the ways that we have ruined our circadian rhythm, one of the ways that we have thrown off what it means to be human on this planet, is that we have adjusted to electricity and we do not get more sleep during the winter months. Well, some of us might, right? But overall, writ large, you're still doing the 40-hour work week. You still have to pick the kids up from school. You still have to do X, Y, and Z regardless of how much snow is on the ground outside. It's snowing here right now. That's what makes me say that. But the work days were shorter in the days of Shakespeare. You would turn in earlier. Both of these things increase the odds of hubba hubba, right? You see where I'm going. Increase the odds of the act, which is to pass on one's genes. You are shut in and you are not quite so tired from the long day of labor. That makes this framing for this poem redundant, right? It adds a layer on the same type of imagery. The third thing that I want to talk about here, yes, winter is death. When you're looking at symbolism, when you're looking at metaphor, the morning is the spring, is the early part of life. is your childhood. The summer is the midday. The midday is the useful parts of your life. The fall is the reaping, the harvesting. The fall in the day cycle is the onset of nightfall, when the sun is going down. In life, there are those years. Now, in Shakespeare's time, this would have been a little bit different. Probably 30s. Today, I would say 40s and 50s with life expectancy growing. It is that time of life where you are reaping the reward for the life that you have led. You are starting to see results and appreciation at work, perhaps. You are starting to see the amount of money you make at work grow, hopefully. You are starting to see those investments which you have made appreciate, hopefully. You are starting to see the fruits of your labor. The fruits of your labor are to be harvested. And obviously, the winter is death. They are the later years of your life. Winter is the nightfall. Winter is the time where everything is dark. But winter is also a symbol for barrenness, for lifelessness, and for isolation. This may seem contrary to what I had just said about being shut in with your hubba hubba lady, but think about it. If you don't have a hubba hubba, a hubba bubba, if you do not have someone with whom you live, being shut in during those cold hours keeps you alone. Even if you do have someone, being shut in that way keeps you isolated from everyone else. Being shut in that way keeps your family apart from other families, from the extended family, from the work. If you do have to work, you are much less likely to run into anyone by happenstance. The amount of people you will deal with in the winter, especially before our modern conveniences, was lower. So, these things, the barren nature of winter, nothing's growing, the lifeless nature of winter, think of all of the animals that freeze to death, think of all the people that used to freeze to death, and the isolation are compounding ideas on the idea of winter and the idea of the subject of this poem needing to pass on his genes. Now, the last thing I want to look at with this poem is the very last line here. And see thy blood warm when thou feelst it cold. Again, this is compounding on all of the metaphors and symbols that we have had so far. See thy blood, your blood running through your body. See it as warm when it feels as if there is cold blood running through your veins. Meaning that to have a child gives you life, livens you up, makes you more exuberant. But also, your blood probably is running colder. You are closer to death. But that child is your blood. That child is younger, is warmer, is more vibrant, is more exuberant. In this way, when Shakespeare is saying these things, and see thy blood run warm when thou feelst it cold, Shakespeare is tripling, quadrupling, quintupling down on this idea that the usefulness of one's self is to be passed on through having a child. Shakespeare is really trying to get this guy to do the hubba hubba number himself and have some children. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel. There's poetry every Monday, and I hope to have you back for the next one.